The $50 fine sat on my kitchen counter like a coiled snake, and I stared at it with the kind of disbelief reserved for lottery losses and parking tickets in empty lots. My name, Derek Lancaster, was typed neatly across the top, along with a violation code that apparently meant I had committed the grievous sin of operating a snowblower on a Sunday morning in the pristine community of Riverside Meadows, Minnesota. I had moved into this neighborhood 6 months ago, thinking I had found the perfect place to settle down after my divorce. The houses were beautiful, the streets were clean, and the community seemed friendly enough. What I had not counted on was Patricia Hendricks, the HOA president, who apparently spent her days looking out her window with binoculars and a notebook, documenting every possible violation she could find. The irony was not lost on me that I had received this fine on a Monday, hand-delivered by Patricia herself, who had knocked on my door at 7 in the morning with a smile that did not reach her eyes. She was probably in her mid-50s, with that particular haircut that seemed to be standard issue for women who enjoyed complaining to managers. Her voice had that syrupy quality that barely masked the satisfaction she took in catching me. "Mr. Lancaster," she had said, drawing out my name like she was disappointed in a child. "I'm sure you're aware that our community bylaws clearly state that power equipment cannot be operated on Sundays. It's a day of rest for everyone, and your snowblower was quite loud yesterday morning." I had been so focused on clearing my driveway after the overnight snowstorm that I had not even considered there might be a rule about it. Back in my old neighborhood, people just did their snow removal whenever they needed to. It was Minnesota in January. Snow happened. You dealt with it. "I'm sorry," I had said, still standing in my doorway in my bathrobe. "I didn't realize. I just moved in, and I haven't had a chance to read through all the bylaws yet." "Ignorance is not an excuse," Patricia had replied, handing me the fine. "The penalty is $50, payable within 30 days. You'll find all the payment information on the notice. I suggest you familiarize yourself with our community rules. They're quite comprehensive." Now, standing in my kitchen with my coffee getting cold, I read through the actual bylaw. Section 7, Paragraph 4 stated that power equipment including but not limited to lawnmowers, leaf blowers, and snow blowers could not be operated on Sundays between the hours of 12:01 a.m. and 11:59 p.m. Fair enough. It was their rule, and I had violated it, even if unintentionally. But as I read further, I noticed something interesting. The rule only applied to Sundays. There were noise ordinances for early mornings and late evenings on other days, but the complete ban only covered Sunday. A slow smile spread across my face as I realized the loophole that Patricia had inadvertently handed me. The weather forecast showed snow for the next several weeks, which was typical for Minnesota in January. And if I could not use my snowblower on Sunday, well, I would just have to make sure I used it every other day of the week instead. Tuesday morning arrived with another 3 inches of fresh snow. I woke up at 6:59 a.m., which was exactly 1 minute before the morning noise ordinance ended at 7 o'clock a.m. I had my coffee, got dressed in my winter gear, and at precisely 7 o'clock I fired up my snowblower. It was a nice model, a 2-stage beast that could handle even the heaviest snow. It was also quite loud. My driveway was already clear from Sunday's secret shoveling by hand, but I made several passes anyway, ensuring that every single snowflake was removed. Then I did my sidewalk. Then I did the sidewalk again. I took my time, being thorough, making sure the machine was running at full throttle. By the time I finished, it was 7:45 a.m. Wednesday brought another dusting of snow, maybe an inch at most. Normal people would have just swept it away or let it melt. I brought out the snowblower at 7 a.m. sharp. Thursday was clear, but I noticed some snow had blown back onto my driveway from the street. Out came the snowblower at 7 a.m. Friday gave us a legitimate snowfall, about 4 inches. I was actually grateful because it meant I had a real reason to run my equipment. I started at 7 a.m., and this time I took extra care to do my entire property, including the small path that led to my backyard gate. By Saturday, I had received another visit from Patricia. This time she did not look quite as smug. "Mr. Lancaster," she said, standing on my porch with her arms crossed, "I've received several noise complaints about your snowblower." "Really?" I said, genuinely surprised. "But I've been very careful to only operate it during permitted hours. I checked the bylaws thoroughly after your last visit. I don't run it before 7 a.m. or after 9 p.m., and I certainly don't run it on Sundays." Her jaw tightened. "You've been running it every single day this week." "Yes," I agreed. "We've had snow every day this week. I'm just maintaining my property, as required by Section 12 of the HOA bylaws, which states that homeowners must keep their driveways and sidewalks clear of snow and ice for safety reasons." "You don't need to run a snowblower for an inch of snow," Patricia snapped, her composure slipping. "The bylaw doesn't specify how much snow constitutes a hazard," I replied calmly. "I'm just being proactive about safety. I would hate for someone to slip on my sidewalk and sue me. I'm sure the HOA would support homeowners taking reasonable precautions to prevent liability issues." I could see the conflict playing out on her face. She wanted to find me, to find something I was doing wrong, but I had been meticulous about following the exact letter of the law. Finally, she just turned and walked away without another word. Sunday came, and true to my word, I did not touch my snowblower. It snowed another 5 inches overnight, and I spent the morning watching from my window as my neighbors dealt with their own driveways. Several of them used snowblowers. I made a note of it, wondering if Patricia would find them too, or if I had received special attention. Around noon, my neighbor from across the street, an older gentleman named Frank Morrison, came over. He was in his 70s, retired, and had lived in Riverside Meadows for over 20 years. "You're making quite the impression," Frank said with a chuckle as I invited him in for coffee. "Not my intention," I replied, though we both knew that was not entirely true. "Patricia came by my place yesterday, asking if your snowblower was bothering me," Frank said, settling into my kitchen chair. "I told her I barely noticed it. I'm up at 6 every morning anyway." "She seems very dedicated to her role as HOA president," I said diplomatically. Frank snorted. "Patricia's been a pain in the neck since she got elected 3 years ago. She means well, I think, but she's one of those people who gets a little bit of power and lets it go to her head. She fined the Johnsons last year because their Christmas lights were the wrong shade of white." "Can you believe that? Wrong shade of white." "That seems excessive," I admitted. "The thing is, most of us just pay the fines and move on because it's not worth the fight. But between you and me, I'm enjoying watching someone push back a little." Frank leaned forward conspiratorially. "Just be careful. Patricia doesn't like to lose, and she's got friends on the HOA board who usually go along with whatever she wants." After Frank left, I spent the afternoon reading through the entire HOA bylaws document. It was 147 pages of rules, regulations, and restrictions covering everything from approved paint colors to the type of mailbox you could install. It was excessive and ridiculous, but it was also full of contradictions and loopholes. Monday morning, 7 a.m., my snowblower roared to life again. There was fresh snow to clear, and I was thorough as always. This time, however, I noticed Patricia standing in her yard, phone in hand, recording me. I waved cheerfully and continued with my work. That evening, I received an email from the HOA board requesting my presence at their next meeting on Thursday evening. The email was vague about the purpose, but I had a pretty good idea what it was about. Tuesday and Wednesday, I continued my routine. 7 a.m. snowblower, thorough clearing. The snow kept coming, which was fortunate for my purposes. I was not going to run the machine unnecessarily, but I was certainly going to use it whenever there was even a reasonable excuse. Thursday evening, I arrived at the community center at 7 p.m. for the HOA meeting. The board consisted of 5 people. Patricia as president, a thin, nervous man named Gerald Thompson as vice president, a heavyset woman named Linda Chen as treasurer, a younger guy named Marcus Rodriguez as secretary, and an older woman named Doris Ferguson as a member at large. About 15 other homeowners were scattered around the room. I recognized Frank, who gave me an encouraging nod. Patricia called the meeting to order and went through the standard business, reports from various committees, discussion of upcoming community events, approval of last month's minutes. Finally, she got to what she had been waiting for. Under new business, Patricia said, looking directly at me, we need to discuss a pattern of disruptive behavior from one of our residents. Mr. Lancaster, would you like to explain why you've been running your snowblower every single day for the past week? I stood up, keeping my voice calm and respectful. I've been clearing snow from my property as required by HOA regulations. We've had snow every day, and I've been careful to only operate my equipment during permitted hours. But every single day, Patricia pressed. That seems excessive. Is there a bylaw that limits how often I can use my snowblower during permitted hours? I asked. Gerald, the vice president, shuffled through some papers. Well, no, not specifically. Then I'm not sure what the issue is, I said. I received a $50 fine for using my snowblower on Sunday, which I paid. I've been very careful since then to follow all the rules exactly. The spirit of the rule is to minimize disruption to the community, Patricia said, her voice rising slightly. With respect, Madam President, I can only follow the rules as they're written, not the spirit you intended. If the bylaw says I can use my snowblower Monday through Saturday during certain hours, then that's what I'm doing. Linda, the treasurer, spoke up. Patricia, I'm not sure we have grounds to take any action here. If he's following the bylaws, we can't penalize him for being thorough about snow removal. He's doing this to be disruptive, Patricia insisted. It's clearly retaliatory. Even if it is, Marcus the secretary added, retaliation isn't against the rules unless he's actually violating something. And from what I can see, he's not. The meeting devolved into a debate among the board members while I stood there quietly. Finally, Doris, who had been silent until now, raised her hand. I move that we table this discussion until we can review the bylaws and determine if any amendments are needed, she said. The motion passed 4-1, with only Patricia voting against it. She glared at me as I sat back down, and I knew this was far from over. Over the next 2 weeks, I continued my routine. It snowed regularly, as it does in Minnesota in late January, and I cleared my driveway at 7 a.m. every time there was accumulation. I also noticed that I was not the only one. Several of my neighbors had apparently taken inspiration from my example, and were being more diligent about their own snow removal. Frank told me that Patricia had been going door to door, trying to gather signatures for a petition to amend the bylaws, but she was not having much success. Most people either did not care about my snowblower, or secretly enjoyed the fact that someone was frustrating Patricia's attempts at total control. Then things escalated. On a Friday morning in early February, I went out to my garage to get my snowblower and found that someone had poured sugar in the gas tank. The machine would not start, and when I checked the fuel, I could see the crystalline residue. It was clearly sabotage. I called the police non-emergency line and filed a report. The officer who came out was sympathetic but realistic about the chances of finding who did it. "Unless you have cameras or witnesses, there's not much we can do," Officer Jenkins said, writing up the report. "But you'll have this on file if anything else happens." "I appreciate you coming out," I said. "I'll look into getting some security cameras installed." After the officer left, I called Frank. "You know anyone who does small engine repair around here?" "Sure, my son-in-law runs a shop over in Plymouth. I'll give him a call, tell him you need some help." While my snowblower was being repaired and cleaned, it snowed again. Sunday came and I still had not gotten my machine back. Monday morning, I was faced with a dilemma. I needed to clear my driveway, but I did not have my snowblower. I decided to rent one from a local hardware store. The rental was louder than my own machine, probably an older model that had seen better days. But it worked, and I cleared my driveway at 7 a.m. as usual. The rental ran rougher than my snowblower, making even more noise. Tuesday, I got my own snowblower back, fully repaired. The mechanic confirmed that someone had definitely sabotaged it, and that I was lucky I had caught it before trying to run the engine, which would have caused serious damage. That evening, I had a security company come out and install cameras covering my driveway, garage, and front yard. The installation took a few hours, but by the end of the night, I had full coverage and cloud backup of all footage. Wednesday morning at 6:30 a.m., my new cameras caught Patricia walking up my driveway. She looked around nervously, clearly not aware she was being recorded, and then pulled out a bottle from her coat. She was heading toward my garage when I opened my front door. "Good morning, Patricia," I called out. "Can I help you with something?" She jumped, nearly dropping the bottle, and quickly shoved it back in her coat. "I was just out for a morning walk and thought I noticed something in your driveway." "Really? What did you notice?" I asked, stepping out onto my porch. Just some ice. Thought you should know for safety." She was already backing away, practically speed walking down my driveway. I waved and went back inside, immediately checking the camera footage on my phone. The bottle she had been carrying was clearly visible in several frames before she hit it. I downloaded the footage and saved it in 3 different locations. At 7 a.m., I started my snowblower as usual. That afternoon, I received a certified letter from the HOA. Inside was a formal notice of a special assessment fine of $250 for creating a sustained pattern of noise disruption to the community. The letter cited multiple complaints from residents, though none were specifically named. I called Frank immediately. "Did you file a noise complaint about my snowblower?" "What? No, of course not," Frank said. "Why?" "HOA just hit me with a $250 fine for noise disruption. Says there have been multiple complaints." Frank was quiet for a moment. "Derek, I'm on the neighborhood email list. I haven't seen any complaints about you. In fact, a couple people have even said they appreciate that you're keeping your sidewalk so clear because they walk their dogs past your place." "So Patricia might be fabricating complaints," I said. "Wouldn't surprise me at all," Frank replied. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to fight it. Can you connect me with anyone else on that email list who might be willing to say they haven't complained?" By the end of the day, I had emails from 12 different neighbors explicitly stating they had not filed noise complaints about my snowblower. Several of them added that they found my snow removal to be responsible and appropriate given the weather conditions. I drafted a formal response to the HOA, citing the lack of any specific bylaw violations, attaching the statements from my neighbors, and requesting a formal hearing to contest the fine. I also mentioned that I had installed security cameras and had footage of what appeared to be suspicious activity around my property. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. In the meantime, I continued my routine. Snowblower, 7 a.m., like clockwork. The night before the hearing, my cameras caught something else. At 2:30 a.m., Patricia and another woman I did not recognize approached my driveway. They were clearly trying to be stealthy, keeping their heads down. Patricia's companion was carrying what looked like a can of spray paint. I watched from my bedroom window as they moved toward my garage door. Then, before they could do anything, I flipped on my outdoor lights and stepped out onto the porch. "Evening, ladies," I called out. "Bit late for a walk, isn't it?" They froze. Patricia's companion immediately ran, disappearing down the street. Patricia tried to play it cool. "I heard a noise and came to investigate," she said. "With a can of spray paint?" I asked, pointing to the can that was now on the ground where her friend had dropped it. "That's not mine," Patricia said quickly. "Lucky I have cameras that say otherwise," I replied. "Patricia, I think you should leave, and I think you should know that I've documented everything, including the attempted sabotage of my snowblower and tonight's vandalism attempt. If anything else happens to my property, I won't hesitate to file criminal charges." Patricia's face went pale in the harsh outdoor lighting. She turned and walked away quickly without another word. The next morning, I compiled all my camera footage, organized it chronologically, and burned it to a DVD. I also uploaded it to a secure cloud service and emailed a copy to my attorney, who I had consulted earlier in the week. The hearing that evening was held in the community center, and this time the room was packed. Word had spread about the conflict between Patricia and me, and apparently, a lot of people wanted to see how it played out. Patricia called the meeting to order, but before she could start, Linda, the treasurer, stood up. "Before we begin, I need to report something to the board and the community," Linda said, looking uncomfortable. "I've been reviewing our complaint records, and I cannot find any formal noise complaints filed against Mr. Lancaster. The fine that was issued last week appears to have been done without proper documentation." Patricia's face flushed red. "There were verbal complaints. I took them seriously and acted on them. Our bylaws require written complaints for any fine over $50, Gerald added, flipping through his copy of the regulations. "Verbal complaints can be noted, but they're not sufficient basis for fines." "This is ridiculous," Patricia snapped. "Everyone knows he's been running that machine every single day just to annoy people." I stood up. "Madam President, I'd like to present evidence relevant to this hearing." I set up my laptop and projector, much to Patricia's visible dismay. I played the footage of her approaching my garage after my snowblower was sabotaged, clearly showing the bottle in her hand. Then I played the footage from the previous night, showing both Patricia and her friend approaching with the spray paint. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Patricia stood up, her face now completely red. "That footage doesn't prove anything," she said desperately. "I was just concerned about the neighborhood." At 2:30 in the morning with spray paint, Frank called out from the audience, "Come on, Patricia." Marcus, the secretary, was shaking his head. "This is serious. If you've been sabotaging a resident's property, that's criminal." "I didn't sabotage anything," Patricia insisted. "I never touched his snowblower." But you were on my property at 6:30 a.m. with a bottle of something the morning after I reported the sabotage, I said. And you attempted to vandalize my garage last night. This is all on camera with timestamps. Linda stood up again. I move that we suspend Patricia from her duties as HOA president pending a full investigation into these allegations. Second, said Doris immediately. You can't do this, Patricia said, but her voice had lost its authority. The vote was 4-1, with Patricia being the only vote against. Gerald, as vice president, assumed the chair for the remainder of the meeting. Mr. Lancaster, Gerald said formally, on behalf of the board, I apologize for the harassment you've experienced. The fine issued against you is hereby rescinded. We'll also be reviewing our procedures to ensure this kind of thing doesn't happen again. I appreciate that, I said. I'd also like to request that the board consider clarifying the noise ordinance bylaws. The current rules are unclear about what constitutes reasonable use of necessary equipment. Agreed, Gerald said. We'll form a committee to review and propose amendments. Anyone interested in serving on that committee is welcome to contact me after the meeting. As people filed out, several neighbors came up to thank me or shake my hand. Frank clapped me on the shoulder. Well done, he said. About time someone stood up to her, but I was not feeling entirely victorious. Patricia had left immediately after the vote, and I had a sinking feeling that this was not over. People like her did not just give up when they lost. Over the weekend, I continued to use my snowblower as needed, but I also kept a close eye on my cameras. Nothing suspicious happened, and I started to think maybe Patricia had finally gotten the message. Monday morning, however, I woke up to find my driveway covered not in snow, but in several dozen bags of rock salt that had been ripped open and scattered everywhere. It was going to take hours to clean up, and it was already starting to damage the concrete. The cameras showed 3 figures in hooded sweatshirts arriving around 4:00 a.m. They worked quickly, dumping the salt, and then leaving in a dark SUV. The license plate was partially visible in a few frames. I called Officer Jenkins, who had handled my previous report. He came out, took the report, and reviewed the footage. I can run this plate, he said. And honestly, given the escalation here, I think we need to take this more seriously. This is vandalism and property damage. If we can identify who did this, there will be charges. I'm pretty sure it's connected to Patricia Hendricks, I said, explaining the situation with the HOA. The HOA president? Officer Jenkins looked surprised. That's quite an accusation. Former president as of last week. I have footage of her attempting to vandalize my property twice already. I showed it at the HOA meeting. Why didn't you file charges then? He asked. I probably should have, I admitted. I thought removing her from power would be enough to stop it. Clearly it wasn't. Let me run this plate and do some follow-up. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. It took me until noon to clean up all the salt from my driveway. My back was aching and I was frustrated. This had gone way beyond a simple HOA dispute. This was harassment and criminal vandalism. That evening, Officer Jenkins called me back. The SUV is registered to a Deborah Mitchell. Does that name mean anything to you? I thought for a moment. No, I don't think so. Wait, maybe. There was another woman with Patricia the night they tried to spray paint my garage. I never got a clear look at her face. I'm going to pay Miss Mitchell a visit tomorrow, Officer Jenkins said. I'll let you know what I find out. Tuesday morning, despite everything, I cleared the light dusting of new snow from my driveway at 7:00 a.m. The routine had become almost meditative at this point, and I was not going to let Patricia or her friends intimidate me into changing my behavior. Wednesday afternoon, Officer Jenkins called again. We had an interesting conversation with Deborah Mitchell. At first, she denied everything, but when we showed her the camera footage, she cracked pretty quickly. She admits to the salt incident and the attempted spray painting. She also says it was all Patricia's idea. Is she being charged? I asked. Yes, vandalism and trespassing. She's cooperating fully, hoping for a lighter sentence. She's given us a full statement implicating Patricia Hendricks in planning both incidents as well as the snowblower sabotage. What happens now? We're getting a warrant for Patricia's arrest. Given the value of the property damage and the pattern of behavior, the prosecutor thinks we can make criminal harassment charges stick along with conspiracy to commit vandalism. I sat down, suddenly feeling the weight of everything that had happened. This all started because I ran my snowblower on a Sunday. Unfortunately, some people can't handle even minor conflicts without escalating them, Officer Jenkins said. You'll likely need to testify if this goes to trial. Are you prepared for that? Yes, I said. I'm tired of being harassed. If that's what it takes to stop it, I'll do it. Thursday morning, I watched from my window as 2 police cars pulled up to Patricia's house. She was led out in handcuffs, looking smaller somehow, less imposing than she had seemed before. A few neighbors came out to watch, whispering to each other. Frank came over later that day. Heard they arrested Patricia. Is it true she was behind all the vandalism? Apparently, I said. Her and a friend named Deborah Mitchell. Frank shook his head. I knew she had control issues, but I never thought she'd go this far. This is going to be quite the scandal for the neighborhood. I just want it to be over, I said honestly. I just want to live my life and take care of my property without drama. You might have achieved more than that, Frank said thoughtfully. The board met yesterday in an emergency session. They're talking about doing a complete overhaul of the bylaws, making them more reasonable. Your little snowblower rebellion might have actually changed things for the better around here. Over the next few weeks, life slowly returned to normal. I continued to use my snowblower when it snowed, though without the strict 7 o'clock a.m. schedule. I used it when I needed to, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, always within the permitted hours but no longer making a point of it. The HOA board, under Gerald's leadership, formed several committees to review and revise the bylaws. I was asked to serve on the equipment usage committee, along with Frank and 3 other neighbors. We met weekly, working to create rules that balanced community peace with practical necessity. Patricia was released on bail but was prohibited from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my property. I saw her once, from a distance, at the grocery store. She looked away quickly and left before I got to the checkout line. In March, I received a letter from the county prosecutor's office. Patricia had accepted a plea deal. She pled guilty to criminal harassment and conspiracy to commit vandalism. She was sentenced to 6 months in jail, with 4 months suspended and 2 years of probation. She was also required to pay restitution for the damage to my snowblower and driveway, as well as community service hours. Deborah Mitchell received a similar but lighter sentence, having cooperated with the investigation. The HOA also settled with me directly, refunding the original $50 fine and paying for my security camera installation as a goodwill gesture. Gerald formally apologized on behalf of the board for how the situation had been handled. By April, the snow had finally melted, and I was able to put my snowblower away for the season. The Equipment Usage Committee had finished its work, and the new bylaws were much more reasonable. Power equipment could still not be used before 7 o'clock a.m. or after 9 o'clock p.m. on weekdays, or before 8 o'clock a.m. or after 8 o'clock p.m. on weekends, but the complete Sunday ban was removed. The new rules recognized that snow removal and lawn care were necessary activities that needed to happen on a schedule dictated by weather, not arbitrary day restrictions. In May, the HOA held elections for a new president. Gerald ran unopposed and won easily. Linda remained as treasurer, Marcus as secretary, and Doris as member-at-large. They also added a new position, a resident advocate, whose job was to help homeowners understand and navigate the bylaws. Frank volunteered for the role and was appointed unanimously. One Saturday in early June, I was mowing my lawn when my new next-door neighbors moved in. They were a young couple with a toddler, probably in their late 20s. The husband, whose name was Michael, came over to introduce himself while his wife, Sarah, directed the movers. "Hey, I'm Michael," he said, shaking my hand. "We're just moving in, hoping to be good neighbors." "Derek," I replied. "Welcome to Riverside Meadows. It's a nice neighborhood." "We heard there was some drama with the HOA a few months back," Michael said cautiously. "Something about a snowblower." I laughed. "Yeah, that was me, but it's all settled now. The HOA is under new management and they're much more reasonable." "Good to hear," Michael said, looking relieved. We were a bit worried when we heard about it, but the house was perfect for us, and everyone we talked to said the neighborhood really is great now. "It is," I agreed. "If you have any questions about the bylaws or anything, Frank Morrison across the street is the resident advocate. He's a good guy to know." Over the summer, I settled into a comfortable routine. I mowed my lawn weekly, maintained my property, and participated in a few HOA committees. The neighborhood felt different somehow, more relaxed. People seemed less worried about petty violations and more focused on actually being a community. In August, I ran into Patricia at the post office. It was the first time I had seen her up close since her arrest. She looked tired, older. She noticed me and hesitated, clearly debating whether to acknowledge me or not. "Hello, Patricia," I said neutrally. "Derek," she replied stiffly. She paused, then added, "I'm moving, selling the house. I can't stay here after everything." "I'm sorry it came to that," I said, and I meant it. I had never wanted to ruin her life, just to be left alone to take care of my property. "I let things get out of hand," Patricia admitted quietly. "I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, maintaining standards, but I became the problem instead." "We all make mistakes," I said. "Mine were bigger than most," she replied. "I'm sorry for what I put you through. The vandalism, the harassment, all of it. You didn't deserve that. It was not a complete or perfect apology, but it was something. I appreciate you saying that." She nodded and walked away, and I never saw her again. September brought the first hints of fall, and with it, the HOA's annual meeting. The turnout was the highest it had been in years. Gerald presented the year's financial report, which showed the community in good shape. Linda announced that several long-deferred maintenance projects would finally be completed. Marcus outlined the new streamlined process for submitting architectural requests. Frank, in his role as resident advocate, gave a report on the complaints and disputes he had helped resolve over the past few months. It was a long list, but he pointed out that every single issue had been resolved without fines or legal action. "The goal of an HOA should be to help maintain our community, not to punish people for minor infractions," Frank said. "This year has shown us that when we work together and approach problems with common sense instead of rigid rule enforcement, we all benefit." The room applauded, and I felt a sense of satisfaction. What had started as a petty dispute over a snowblower had somehow transformed into a real positive change for everyone in Riverside Meadows. In October, I was named to the HOA board as a member-at-large after Doris resigned due to health issues. I accepted the position, hoping to continue the work of making the community more livable and less litigious. When the first snow fell in November, I cleared my driveway with my snowblower on a Saturday morning at 8 a.m. No one complained. No one filmed me. No fines appeared on my doorstep. It was gloriously mundane. Frank came over later that day for coffee, as had become our routine. "Remember last winter when all this started?" he asked. "How could I forget?" I replied. "You know what the best part is?" Frank said with a grin. "You won. Not just against Patricia, but you actually made things better for everyone. That's rare." "I just wanted to clear my driveway," I said. "And you did. You just happened to clear out some dead wood in the HOA while you were at it." Frank raised his coffee mug in a toast. "To snowblowers and reasonable bylaws." I clinked my mug against his. "To reasonable bylaws." December brought heavy snows, and I used my snowblower regularly, along with most of my neighbors. The sound of snow removal equipment had become just another part of the winter soundscape, no more remarkable than the wind or the scrape of shovels. On Christmas Eve, the neighborhood held a holiday party in the community center. It was well attended, festive, and pleasant. I brought cookies that I had definitely not made myself, having bought them from the bakery in town, but no one seemed to mind. Gerald pulled me aside at one point during the evening. "I wanted to thank you again for serving on the board. You've brought a really helpful perspective." "Happy to help," I said. "You know, when you first moved in and that whole snowblower thing started, a lot of people thought you were going to be a troublemaker," Gerald admitted. "But you ended up being exactly what this community needed. Someone willing to stand up when things weren't right." "I really did just want to clear my driveway," I said, repeating what had become my standard response. Gerald laughed. "Maybe so. But you did a lot more than that, whether you meant to or not." As the party wound down and neighbors headed home through the gently falling snow, I stood outside for a moment, looking at the neighborhood. Lights twinkled on houses, smoke curled from chimneys, and everything looked peaceful and perfect, like a Christmas card. This was what an HOA should help create, I thought. A community where people felt comfortable and safe, where rules existed to help rather than hinder, where conflicts were resolved through communication rather than fines and harassment. My phone buzzed with a text from my ex-wife. "Heard about your HOA adventures. Sounds like you finally found your place. Merry Christmas, Derek." I smiled and texted back. "Merry Christmas to you too." I had found my place. It had taken a snowblower, a stubborn streak, and an unreasonable HOA president to get there, but I had found it. Riverside Meadows was home now, truly home, in a way it had not been when I first moved in. January arrived with more snow, and I faced it with my trusty snowblower and no fear of fines. Every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday when it snowed, I cleared my driveway during reasonable hours. On Sundays, I used my snowblower too, now that the bylaw had been changed. Life had returned to normal, or rather, it had become normal for the first time since I had moved to Minnesota. The story of my conflict with Patricia had become neighborhood legend, told to new residents as both a cautionary tale and an example of how communities can change for the better. The legal aftermath of Patricia's actions continued through the winter. Her house sold in February, and she moved to somewhere out of state, Wisconsin, I heard, though I never confirmed it. Deborah Mitchell completed her community service and probation without incident. The restitution payments came through, covering all my expenses and then some. In March, as the snow began to melt again and spring approached, I received a call from a local news station. They had heard about the story and wanted to do a piece on HOA reform, using my experience as an example. I agreed to the interview, hoping that maybe sharing my story would help other people dealing with unreasonable HOAs. The segment aired in April, and I got calls and emails from people all over Minnesota, and even a few from other states, thanking me for speaking up. One email in particular stood out. It was from a man in Iowa who had been fighting with his HOA over similar issues. He wrote that seeing my story had given him the courage to stand up for himself and demand changes to his community's bylaws. He had succeeded, and his HOA was now working on reforms similar to what we had implemented in Riverside Meadows. I realized then that the impact of what had started as a simple dispute over a snowblower had rippled out far beyond my own neighborhood. It was a strange feeling, being accidentally influential, but it was also satisfying. As spring turned to summer, I found myself genuinely happy in Riverside Meadows. My neighbors were friendly, the HOA was reasonable, and I had become an active part of making the community better. I had never expected to find such a sense of belonging when I moved here after my divorce, but somehow, through the strangest series of events I had, the snowblower sat in my garage, waiting for next winter. It was just a tool, a machine for clearing snow, but it had become a symbol of something more. A symbol of standing up for what was right, of refusing to be bullied, and of the positive change that could come from simply holding people accountable to their own rules. Frank and I joked sometimes about writing a book about the whole experience. HOA horror stories, how a snowblower started a revolution, he would say, laughing. We never did write it, but the story lived on in the neighborhood, passed down and embellished with each telling. By the time the next winter rolled around, I had been living in Riverside Meadows for over a year and a half. The anniversary of that first Sunday morning, when I had unknowingly violated the snowblower rule, came and went. This time, when snow fell on a Sunday, I cleared my driveway without a second thought, using my snowblower at a reasonable hour, and no one cared. That was the real victory, I realized. Not the charges against Patricia, not the reformed bylaws, not even the positive media attention. The real victory was that I could now use my snowblower whenever I needed to, within reasonable hours, any day of the week, and it was completely unremarkable. I had wanted nothing more than to be left alone to take care of my property, and now I had that. But I had also gained a community, friends, and a sense of purpose in helping to make Riverside Meadows a better place to live. The snowblower still fired up reliably every winter morning when snow fell. Its roar was no longer a statement of defiance, but simply the sound of a man taking care of his home. And that was exactly how it should be. Looking back, I could see how easily things might have gone differently. I could have just paid the fine and never used my snowblower on Sunday again, letting Patricia's overreach go unchallenged. I could have escalated things differently, gotten angry, fought in ways that would have made me look like the bad guy. Instead, I had chosen to follow the rules exactly as written, to document everything and to trust that eventually reasonableness would prevail. It had worked out, though not without cost. Patricia had gone to jail. I had spent months dealing with harassment and vandalism, and the neighborhood had been torn apart by conflict. But we had come through it stronger, with better systems in place, and a renewed sense of what community really meant. The HOA was no longer feared but respected, no longer a source of petty harassment, but an actual helpful organization that maintained our neighborhood while respecting residents' rights and common sense. As I sat on my porch on a warm summer evening, watching the sun set over Riverside Meadows, I felt contentment. My journey here had been strange and difficult, but I had found my place. The snowblower incident, as it was still called, had been the catalyst for change that the neighborhood had needed. And when winter came again, as it always does in Minnesota, I would be ready. My snowblower would be maintained and fueled, my driveway would be clear, and most importantly, I would be free to take care of my property without fear of unreasonable fines or petty harassment. That was all I had ever wanted, and through the strangest series of events, it was exactly what I had achieved. The snowblower sat waiting in the garage, a tool and a symbol, ready for the next snowfall and whatever challenges might come with it. But this time, I knew I had a community behind me, reasonable rules to guide me, and the confidence that doing the right thing, even when it was difficult, would ultimately prevail. The story of how an HOA fined me for running my snowblower on Sunday, and how I responded by running it every other day, had become part of the neighborhood's history. It was a story about standing up to unreasonable authority, about the importance of clear and fair rules, and about how one person's stubborn refusal to be bullied could create positive change for an entire community. And every time it snowed, every time I fired up that snowblower, I was reminded of that journey and grateful for where it had led me. Home.